The Premier League is only 3 weeks old at this point. It is the 2022-23 season, but you can already see a few patterns begin to emerge. At this point, you can already tell which clubs are probably, primed for a good run at either the title or a top 4, top 6, top 7 finish. And you can tell which are the teams that will potentially be having a little bit of struggle. Keeping all that in mind, and also keeping in mind the fact that the transfer window is still open, but only for a few more days. That means that game week 4 should be a very, very interesting game week to watch out for. And hello everyone, welcome back to Sports Today. My name is Shane Dias, and today we're going to look at the major talking points ahead of all of the fixtures in game week 4 of the Premier League. Now obviously we're going to look at every match as is and talk about who'd be the favorites, who would we be expecting to struggle, what are the surprises we can expect, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's check out the first game that we want to talk about, and it involves the defending champions Manchester City. Now obviously City could potentially be sitting on top of the Premier League table even now were it not for a thrilling 3-all draw against Newcastle last week. But they're taking on a kind of a mixed Crystal Palace side that have made a somewhat mixed start to the campaign. They've won one, they've drawn one, they've lost one. So Palace are struggling for a little bit of consistency, and it's not ideally the best time to be making a trip to the Etihad Stadium, where we know that City tend to like scoring goals for fun. Of course, this City side is so good that they'll score goals for fun regardless. But again, this match you'd have to say City clear favourites. Palace, though, have shown in the past that they can potentially spring a few upsets every now and again. And in Patrick Vieira, they have a coach who's still learning the trade, but has demonstrated an astute streak that does show that he could be a very good manager for the future. What exactly Palace can do, I think in this case, them getting even a draw would be a massive result, because again, as I said, in the Etihad, that's very much a fortress for City. They rarely, if ever, lose over there, never mind even dropping points. So this, obviously, I am expecting it to be a somewhat one-sided match, but I would be very happy to be proven wrong. And of course, there is, a Manchester United side who are very reinvigorated, having actually bested Liverpool 2-1 in the last game week. Well, they're going to be facing a whole different kind of challenge against Southampton. Now, it is important to note that one of the reasons United had so much joy against Liverpool is because Liverpool tend to play a very high line, and United's attackers, the likes of Rashford and Sancho and even Fernandes, like actually running in behind defenses rather than actually operating in front of low blocks. Now, Southampton will present a somewhat different challenge. Not only do they tend to press higher up the field than what United actually do, but what is worse is that they will actually look to sit deeper when United are in the attacking third. Now, that is something that United have tended to struggle with at times, because their attackers, the likes of Anthony Martial, Rashford, Sancho, don't necessarily get a lot of space to run into. Against Liverpool, they had that. Against Southampton, they probably might not have that. And again, Ralph Hasenhüttl has proven that he does tend to possess these tricks and tweaks that can sometimes ensure that he gets away with results against the bigger teams. And don't forget, this is not a match that United are going to be playing in their home ground, so they do have that disadvantage. They'll be going to St. Mary's, but for Erik ten Hag and co, it's imperative that they actually find a way to get some points, if not a win, from this particular encounter, because another loss will be demoralizing, especially considering that they've added a defensive midfielder in Casemiro and would potentially be working to add more players before the transfer window slams shut. Now, speaking of transfer window slamming shut, Chelsea and Leicester are going to be facing off against one another, with a Leicester City player in Wesley Fofana very clearly angling away for a move to Chelsea. And in fact, he was left out of Leicester's last game, and because he was apparently not in the right frame of mind to be playing. He clearly wants to move. Chelsea want to make it happen. Leicester are playing hardball over a fee, but you have to look at the form of both of these sides as well, and it hasn't been great. Chelsea in particular are coming off a 3-0 mauling against Leeds, and would actually be coming against the Leicester side at a perfect time, because Leicester have had a very bad start to the season. They've looked out of sorts. That squad looks in desperate need of refreshing, but they can't really refresh that squad unless they actually sell players, which of course makes you wonder why they aren't selling Fofana. But anyway, the point is, For Chelsea, this is a great opportunity to actually, get back some momentum after that Leeds loss. Clearly demoralized a lot. And don't forget, Chelsea are also working on getting a couple of players in, potentially the likes of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, or maybe even another centre-back could be coming their way before the transfer window slams shut. For Leicester, there's already talks of unrest, but this is as good a chance of any for them to actually show that, look, we're still a united front and we still believe we're a side that's good enough to challenge the top sides. So interesting matchup between the two London sides for me, but of course slight edge goes to Chelsea in this case. Again, home match, and Leicester have looked really out of sorts through the start of the season up until this point. Liverpool, by the way, speaking of out of sorts, they have had a torrid start to the season, and they're currently closer to the bottom of the table than they are to the top of the table. Now, that's not ideal for Liverpool, considering most expected them to be challenging City, the team that would be closest to challenging City for the title. But it hasn't been a good start to the season for them, and there's a lot of mitigating factors involved here. They're clearly missing a couple of their players. The intensity from the squad hasn't really been great for the most part, but there is a time when you realize that the time for excuses runs out, and I think Liverpool desperately need a response and need it soon, which is why them going up against Bournemouth would be the ideal match for them in this particular case, for the simple reason that Bournemouth are newly promoted. They won't really present much of a challenge, and the match is in Anfield, so that also works in favor of Liverpool. Again, I'm expecting Liverpool to coast a win in this case, but if they do end up dropping points, it's going to be leaving the start of their campaign looking in even worse shape than it already is. Now, from a big team that have actually made a poor start to one that has actually made a really good start, Arsenal, by the way, currently sit atop the Premier League standings, and no, this is not because the table is arranged in alphabetical order. They've actually taken 9 points of 3 games and a 100% record up until this point. Mikel Arteta and his men have actually started the season really well. The likes of Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko have filled in nicely. They've settled in nicely to the team. They're looking like a very dangerous side, and they're looking like a side whose manager was back to the hilt and who's allowed to implement his vision. It's too early to say if Arsenal are in for a title run or in fact even a top 4 finish. What is clear, on the other hand, is that the squad is on the up, and considering they're going to be coming up against a Fulham side who themselves have blown a little hot and cold so far this season, will be an ideal match for Arsenal to make it 4 wins out of 4, and I'm backing them to do just that. Fulham, despite the fact that I don't think they're going to be struggling for relegation this season. I don't think they're going to be up to challenging Arsenal either, at least not the way Arsenal are playing so far. If you're an FPL fan, by the way, if you're someone who enjoys playing the fantasy gaming, I'd highly recommend captaining Gabriel Jesus. I'm expecting him to run right in this particular game. And speaking of course, North London clubs, there's also Tottenham Hotspur, who made a decent start to the season, despite the fact that it's pretty clearly evident that they're not really playing up to their consistent best even now. Nevertheless, they managed to snatch a 2-2 draw against Chelsea. They beat Wolverhampton Wanderers 1-0, and now they're going to be travelling to newly promoted Nottingham Forest. So obviously that is a game that Antonio Conte's men would be backing them to win, because of course, as I said, newly promoted side, you'd be expecting them to do well. But again, Forest have shown in recent times that they can be, they're a pretty underrated side in that regard. And don't forget, they've made quite a few additions, so they might just end up posing a bit of a threat. Again, Tottenham have won, or rather had taken points from games so far this season that have been fairly close, but anything other than 3 points for Conte's men will seem very much like a disappointment in this regard. Considering some of the other matches, you have Wolves, who again lost last week to Spurs 1-0, taking on a Newcastle side who very nearly ended up taking 3 points off Manchester City. And mind you, this Newcastle side are going to be coming in for improvements, because as we discussed yesterday on this channel, they'll be signing forward Alexander Isak from Real Sociedad, and already Newcastle are looking really, really good and looking like a side that should be challenging for a top half finish in this particular season. But if they can sign Isak, they could realistically be making a tilt for at least the top 6, if not more, and hardly the time for Wolves to be coming in contact with them. However, it is worth noting that Wolves themselves have been making some moves in the transfer market, so if you ask me, this is the one game I'd be very, very interested to look at from a neutral perspective, and for two sides that aren't necessarily quote-unquote top 6 sides just yet. Both of them play decent football. Both of them are sides that are clearly aiming for bigger things. And so I think it's going to be a very, very interesting battle. Speaking of other matches that, there's a couple more matches still to go. So Brighton versus Leeds, I think, would also be an interesting match. These are both sides that would be looking to maintain their status as clubs in the upper middle part of the table. Again, Brighton have proven that they can be a side that can beat anyone on their day. Remember, they beat Manchester United to start the season, and Leeds are just coming off a 3-0 win over Chelsea. So this should be another interesting game. Hopefully it is at least, because it also pitches up against each other two coaches who I think have massive futures. There's Jesse Marsch of Leeds United and of course Graham Potter of Brighton, both of whom have done a pretty good job at their respective sides. And so I think it'll be an interesting clash of styles between both of these two teams. So I for one am also looking forward to this match. And of course, you're talking about matches of teams who, this match, by the way, Aston Villa versus West Ham, is very much a tale of two sides who probably have started the season as well as they would have hoped. Again, remember, Aston Villa, since bringing in Steven Gerrard as the manager, has spent a lot of money, but so far they don't look anywhere closer to the top half of the table than they should be, whereas West Ham currently sit 20th in the league. So hardly an ideal spot for them to be in, considering West Ham for the most part of last 2-3 years have been in around the top 6. Of course, West Ham are looking to make more signings. Remember, they were targeting a certain Brazilian midfielder. If you want to know who it is I'm talking about, check out our transfer rumor roundup. And of course, Villa, I don't think would be targeting more signings, but they need some more consistency. The side is a good enough side to be competing against most of the other sides, but they haven't really had that consistent run of form yet. Which of these two sides will get that consistency? I say West Ham. I'm giving them a slightly more slight edge over Villa, but again, we don't really know for sure. And of course, there is this match between two sides who are in very, very different very different ends of the spectrum, let's say. Everton, remember, escaped relegation by the skin of their teeth in the last season. Brentford, on the other hand, impressed one and all, not only by the fact that they beat United at the start of this season, but even last year. Remember, they started their Premier League campaign by beating Arsenal, and generally they've played some very good football. So this is a very interesting battle, and also because this Brentford team, they're very well coached, and that can't really be said about Everton, who look a bit of a mishmash mess right now. Whether or not Frank Lampard will get the chance to sort this team out in the long run remains to be seen, because again, Everton are a notoriously difficult club to actually get right. Will he get the time to do that? We don't know for sure, but the best way for him to actually win time will be to win games and get points and get the team away from another relegation scrap like they were at the end of last season. However, Brentford are going to be in no mood whatsoever to actually roll over and let that happen. And that's it for the talking points from this particular week's matches. Don't forget, of course, to let us know which match you're looking forward to the most and why in the comments. And don't forget to show your love to this video by liking it, sharing it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel, by the way, if you haven't already, and of course tap the bell icon so you know when it is we're going live or uploading a new video for you guys. Don't also forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're on all platforms posting lovely content for you, our family members. And of course, download the Sportslick app for all the breaking news from this week's Premier League as well as other sporting events happening around the world. It is your one-stop destination for all sporting related news. Thank you all so much for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Dice, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon. But bye-bye for now.